I was so excited when Pastor Rich reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and asked me if I could come, and the timing worked perfect for today. I just released a new book called The Way of the Warrior a couple of weeks ago, and I'm really excited because I think it's a message that is really needed in this moment, and I know even personally it was needed for my own soul. You know, one of the crazy things about being a writer is how things form and come together in your mind, and sometimes it feels as if the book is just demanding its voice out of your life. And my wife and I were driving through Hollywood. I was driving down Vine. We were both having a moment just of quietness. And all of a sudden I heard this inner voice just say to me, the warrior is not ready for battle until they've come to know peace. This is the way of the warrior. I had no idea where that came from. I wasn't thinking about any theme that connected to this. But the words were so stark inside of my own soul that I wrote them down. And I remember the moment I heard it, I leaned over to my wife, Kim, and I said, I know what my next book is, and I know what the first line is. I had no idea what the second line would be. And as I began to write this book, it took me places I did not expect. I didn't think that I would be diving into depression and anxiety and stress and panic attacks and the inner battles of our souls. And these are battles that I'm all too familiar with. I was in a psychiatric chair by the time I was 12 years old and in and out of a hospital as a kid. And my inner world was always in turmoil. And there were times in my life I didn't know if I would ever find my way through to wholeness and health. And Los Angeles is a city that permeates that kind of story. It's amazing how cities take on a particular character like Miami or New York or Chicago or LA. LA has this unique ability to draw the most creative people in the world who have the same dream. And so you have all these talented, gifted, intelligent, beautiful, handsome, arrogant, narcissistic people coming to LA to pursue a dream. But the problem is it's 100,000 people pursuing the same dream. And where they were the best, where they came from, now they're just average because everyone is beautiful and talented and intelligent and gifted and awesome and narcissistic. And so they're all there together being the best of the best of the best. And if you look at them from the surface, you think, oh, these are the people that have it made. These are the ones that have the life we all want. And yet when you just dig just a little bit beneath the surface, you find an overwhelming epidemic of depression and anxiety and panic attacks, and 24-year-olds who are medicated for depression, and 28-year-olds who are struggling and paralyzed with panic attacks, and 15-year-olds who are having suicidal thoughts. And it began to just war against my own soul, how many people I've watched and I've lost over the years. Somehow we have to have an open conversation about what's going on inside of us. And we can see it everywhere in our culture. We see the rage and the anger. We see the violence. We see the terrorism. We see wars everywhere. And yet what we have really in many ways ignored is that the reason we have a history of wars is that we have a heart of war. That the reason there are wars that rage all around us is that there are wars that rage within us. And I wrote this book with one specific conviction, that we will never have world peace until we have inner peace. You know, we humans are kind of an extraordinary species. You ever paid attention? I mean, you humans are amazing. I've always loved watching humans from a distance. And I mean, think about this. Of all the species that are out there, you're the only species that ever harnessed fire. And even with thousands of years to catch up, no other species has pulled it off. I mean, no other species knows how to capture fire. They just run from it or get consumed by it. But we create fireplaces and put them in our homes because we're not afraid of fire. We're the species that took light and took mastery over it. We put light into bulbs and told it what to do. That's almost like a superpower, right? We're the species that harnessed nuclear energy and solar energy. We're the species who invented the internet and learned how to communicate sound across invisible waves that could travel across the world and into space. oh, we're the species that could travel into space and into the ocean depths. We invented the television and the telephone, and we invented pizza. And to be fair, we also invented donuts. There's no other species that has a resume like that. You're the only species on the planet that can ever claim any of that. So if you're ever feeling like your resume isn't really impressive, just put down things my species has done. And yet, as developed and complex and amazing as humans are, the one thing we've never been able to do is create world peace. Don't you think it's a bit odd that we invented these ships that can fly into space and take us from LA to Miami in just a few hours, but we cannot figure out how to bring world peace? We can't even isolate one section of the world, the Middle East, and figure out how to bring peace. Even though everyone prays for it, and many visualize it, and others have fought for it, we can't seem to find our way to it. The reason we cannot bring peace on earth is you cannot create what you do not have. You cannot bring to the world what you do not have to bring to the world. And so the only way we're ever going to have world peace is if we fight for inner peace and we bring a peace from within us to the world around us. And then there's another layer that becomes even a more difficult obstacle. Is if a person doesn't believe in God and they have never trusted their life to Jesus, they don't have anything to lose when they say, I'm depressed. See, they don't have anything to hide when they say, I'm struggling with panic attacks, I'm dealing with anxiety, I have an anxiety disorder. In fact, the more you have of something in any culture, the more language you have to describe it. I'm from El Salvador. We don't have a lot of cold things. So we have one word that covers snow and ice cream, nieve. That's it. We only need one word for cold things. But I interviewed once an Inuit Eskimo, and he had over 30 words for snow because he had a lot of snow experiences. When I moved to North Carolina from Miami, I had snow experiences. The first time I went, oh, snow. And they go, and those are just flurries. Like snow without ambition, right? And I was like, oh, snow. No, that's sleet. It's messy snow. And then another time it was snow. No, that's hail. That's angry snow. And I kept learning about different kinds of snow because I had different experiences. Think about how many words we have now for mental illness. How many words we have for phobias. See, I'm a lot older than most of you, so we only had one word when I was growing up. You were either sane or insane. Or you were just crazy. But now you're manic depressive, you're bipolar, you have ADD, ADHD, you're OCD, and all those initials actually mean something to you because you have a PhD level knowledge of phobias because it's become the cultural norm in our society. And so we can talk about panic attacks and social anxiety disorder. We can talk about depression. We can talk about those things because they become the common language, because the more a culture has of something, the more language it has to describe it. Wow. So good. But then you see, if you believe in God and you believe in Jesus, you're not allowed to have these problems. Because after all, in fact, I'm not supposed to do it, but I read book reviews, and so I was on Amazon and I was reading the reviews for The Way of the Warrior, and the best review I got was from a guy who said, I don't even believe in God, but I love this book. He said it's effing good. And I'm like, you know, and the worst review I got, the 2-star, I'm still bitter, was from a Christian. And she said, we're not supposed to battle for inner peace. This isn't supposed to be a war. Jesus just gives us peace. Why doesn't he talk about that? See, and this is the problem. We keep trying to deal with deep human issues with spiritual cliches. And so the moment you open yourself up and say, I'm struggling with depression, or I'm struggling with anxiety, or I'm having panic attacks, they just give you a verse to memorize. tell you, pray about it, just trust Jesus. After all, he gives you peace. And so you can't ever bring it up again, because otherwise you'll be giving God a bad name. And I want you to understand that struggling with your inner world is not a sign of your lack of faith. It's not a sign that you are weak. It's a sign that you are human. And if you step into this battle, it doesn't make you a coward. It actually makes you a warrior, because it's the most courageous thing you can do to go to war for your soul. And I didn't think any guy would read a book that said, help me, I'm hurting. It works much better, The Way of the Warrior. And I know that women are actually the greatest warriors out there, so I wanted to give them a manual. So what I want to do is I want to take a few moments, I want to step into the life of someone we consider heroic and peel back the facade to see what is real. Have you ever heard someone say, oh, I wish I could live like David or Joshua or Moses or Deborah, Esther, Ruth, and they go, I just wish I could have that kind of life? That's how I know a person has never read the Bible. Because if you ever want to be like somebody in the Bible, you have not read the Bible. You're only hearing the stories of their highlights. And the reason we get so depressed, the reason we feel so inadequate is that we keep measuring their highlights to our real life. And our real life will never match up to someone else's highlights. So there's this moment in the life of Elijah. Now, if you don't know who Elijah is X-Men before there were X-Men. Before Xavier ever rolled in his chair, Elijah existed. Before Wolverine or Magneto, before DC or Marvel or Marvel, Elijah existed. Before Stan Lee ever wrote a page, there was Elijah on the page. Elijah would be like the classic superhero. He has a superpower. It says he prayed, and for 3.5 years it did not rain. Then he prayed again, and it rained. It tells us that he prayed and fire came down from heaven. That's kind of epic. And there's a story behind that. He was going up against almost 1,000 false prophets, and he said, look, you're leading everybody astray. Let's solve this right now. You build an altar, I'll build an altar. You know the story, many of you. You pray to your gods, and you ask him to bring fire. I'll pray to my God, I'll ask him to bring fire. Whoever God brings fire, that's the God everybody will worship. Everybody said, awesome. So they went first. They built their altar, and they prayed out to their God. And Elijah, he's sort of like a caustic Howard Stern. You know, Jewish, little cynical, brutal, maybe even unkind. And Elijah's like, you need to pray louder because your God clearly cannot hear you. It's hard when your God goes deaf. But it's really hard for a God that doesn't exist to hear you. And he just went on, just kept taunting them. They kept praying and praying. And they started cutting their bodies because that was the darkness of their faith. Don't let anyone tell you that all religions are the same. And they were cutting their bodies, trying to get their God's attention. And Elijah's over here still mocking them. My favorite, it's sort of translated in a soft way, but he's actually saying, maybe your God's constipated or has diarrhea, you know. He's indisposed. It's a terrible thing when your God is not available. And so maybe you need to just wait till, well, he relieves himself and can actually help you. No, nothing. So after hours went by and they'd cut themselves so profoundly, they had no strength left. It was Elijah's turn, and he had to sort of soup it up. He couldn't just pray, bring fire. He said, just drench it with water over and over and over again, 7 times over again, until the water was just drenching the altar. Then he prays a really simple prayer like, God, you've got this. And then God sends fire from heaven and consumes all the water, that altar, the other altar, and some people. Details. And then they wiped out all the false prophets. And now we pick up after that. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done. and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Now, if you don't know who Ahab and Jezebel is, they're two malevolent leaders, a king and a queen. And you can know how evil Jezebel was by the fact that no one ever names their daughter Jezebel, okay? And if your name happens to be Jezebel, I'm so sorry for you. But I would probably pick a nickname. And it says, now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, that he had sent fire down from heaven, that he had consumed the altars and all their prophets were gone. So Ahab told Jezebel all of this. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them. In other words, Jezebel sends a messenger to say, Elijah, I'm coming for you and I'm gonna kill you. Now, if you didn't know how the story was gonna go and you had to write what's gonna happen next, you know what you'd write, right? You'd be Elijah going, bring it on. Who do you think you are, woman? I am Elijah Firecaller. I just called fire down from heaven and consumed all of your false prophets. You think you have something, bring it on. But he doesn't. He hears a threat from Jezebel. It's not even Jezebel. She just sends a message. I'm going to kill you. It's not even Ahab and Jezebel, just Jezebel. And it says in verse 3, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. Because that's what every hero does after they pray fire down from heaven. And have you had this thought, if I could just have one miracle, I would be good for the rest of my life? You ever thought, the reason I struggle with faith is because I haven't had a big one. If I could just have one, if I could just have one fire from heaven moment, I'd be good rest of my life. I wouldn't need to ask anything else. I believe. I wake up every morning, fire. Every day. It doesn't matter how hard life was, fire. Because nothing could shake you, right? Because you prayed and fire came down from heaven. But Elijah prayed and had fire come and he's afraid and he runs for his life. I don't want to say something inappropriate, but he's running from a girl. Which now I know makes sense. He was afraid and he ran for his life. He did exactly the opposite of what heroes do. Have you ever realized that success doesn't seem to carry you very long? And that success will never exempt you, will never immune you from feeling like a failure. There's something odd about the way we're broken. This is where you can see the brokenness inside of us, that we can have success after success after success, and we will still feel insignificant. We'll have success after success, and we'll still feel afraid. That no matter how much you accumulate, you'll always be afraid of losing what you have. And there's some of you, by every measure, you're successful. Everyone wants your life. Everyone thinks you have it all together. You're doing great. No one could ever imagine you having an inner turmoil, a struggle with your own sense of value and significance. See, no one can see inside of you, but you're the one who knows that all success is just hiding your fear that you're a failure. That you'll never live the life you're created to live. And it's not usually sequential. It's not like I'm successful on Tuesday and I'm a failure on Wednesday. It's almost like we're bi-emotional. We can feel like a failure and a success at the same time. You can't explain it. Everyone else would say, you have what you've always wanted, and it is everything you've ever wanted, and it's nothing you want. Because so oftentimes the things we fight to get, to have, to own, ends up owning us. And it doesn't heal us. And sometimes what we have to do is we have to step back and realize, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why do I always have to have more? Why do I have to have more money? Why do I have to have more things? Why do I have to have more power? Why do I have to have more prestige? Why do I have to have more fame? Why do I have to have more people? Why do I have to have more relationships? Why do I have to conquer more things and more people?
What am I trying to hide? And Elijah ran for his life because he was afraid. Because he forgot who he was and who God was. And so he was afraid of a threat. Have you ever noticed that it's not usually the big thing that trips you up? You can handle the big stuff. You're ready for the big problems, for the big challenge. It's that small, little, insignificant thing that no one else sees that just trips you up. Leaves you flat on the ground. And I remember even writing this book, how I felt the inner struggle even within me. And when the book came out, I had to call my wife from New York and say, I'm having panic attacks. I don't even know what's going on. And the terrible thing about it is, you see, when you're afraid, when you're gripped by fear, it's not actually rooted in reality. It's rooted in possibilities. And this is the strange thing about it, is that even for people who don't believe in God, I have so many friends who are atheists or agnostics, and they'll tell me, Erwin, we're just too evolved to have faith. We've outgrown faith. We're too educated for faith. Faith is superstition. And I'll say, well, have you outgrown fear? Because way before I outgrow faith, I'd like to outgrow fear. How about you? See, I don't see the huge benefit of outgrowing faith when that's a positive view of the future. I see a huge benefit in outgrowing fear when that's a negative view of the future. See, the reality is that if you're living in fear, you're actually living with the negative side of faith. Because fear is faith in the worst possible future. It hits you young. It's only gonna get worse. He ran for his life, and be careful that when you're running for your life, you're not running from your life. Because whenever you're afraid, you've actually hit the boundary of your freedom. And if you'll step past that fear, you will actually step into your future. And so Elijah stepped into the boundary of his fear, and he decided to run in the other direction. And then he says he went to Beersheba in Judah, and he left his servant there. And while he himself went on a day's journey into the wilderness, he came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. Now, you need to be careful, because when you're in your darkest moments, you will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Have you ever noticed that when you're full of despair, you actually create an environment of despair? Yeah. When you become hopeless, you begin to eliminate all the hope in your life. Yeah. Elijah felt alone. We find out he tells God later, I'm alone in the world. I'm alone in this battle. I'm alone in this fight. I want you to know, you're not alone in this fight. Yeah. And by the way, if you're here and you don't feel like you're strong enough to fight, just let us fight for you. Because if you don't have the strength to fight for yourself, let us fight for you. And he runs for his life, and he feels alone, so he leaves his servant behind, and he travels alone. He literally created in his external world what he was feeling in his internal world. He felt alone, so he made sure he was alone. He was in a desert, so he ran into the desert. He was in a wilderness, so he went into the wilderness. If you're not careful, when you feel that you're alone, you will cut off every relationship in your life. When you feel like you're not worthy of love, you will actually cut off everyone who loves you. When you feel hopeless, you will disconnect everyone who's hopeful. When you're drowning in despair, you will avoid everyone who could actually bring you joy. Have you ever wondered why we're so drawn to cutting everyone out the moment we desperately need to let everyone in? The fact that you're here in this moment means you have the opportunity to redirect your life and find hope, to find community, to find family, to find a future. And then he sat under the tree, the bush, and prayed that he might die. Now, I gotta say, that's the most uncreative prayer I've ever heard. I mean, think about this. This is the only prayer he could think of. I want to die, God. This is the guy who prayed and it did not rain for 3.5 years. Stop raining. I want to die. Rain, die. Fire from heaven, die. Really, you had all these epic prayers and all you can think of praying right now is, God, kill me. What about like, God, send a tornado and swoop up Jezebel? That's a creative prayer. God, open the earth, swallow her up, then close the earth. I'm just saying, another creative prayer. Or God, just do it in a humiliating way. Send a goat, just to trample her. Or God, change Jezebel's heart and turn her into Deborah or Esther or Ruth. God, show her a new way and make my enemy my ally. There could be so many creative prayers, but the only prayer he could pray is, God, I want to die. And there is sort of, I know it's hard to see, but there's humor here. It's hard because you're not Jewish. So it's like cultural humor. Okay, because, all right, why is he running? Because Jezebel says, I'm going to kill you. So he runs and runs and runs and runs and hides and hides and hides. Then he says, God, kill me. It's like, I took care of that over there. If you really want to die, just go back. He doesn't really want to die, because if he really wanted to die, he would just go back to Jezebel. If he really thought she was going to kill him, he should just go face Jezebel. I got your answered prayer, and you ran from it. Wow. You should be glad God has not answered all your prayers. See, God will never affirm a prayer that says there's no hope and no future. And then he says, God, take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. I've had enough. I go, really, Elijah, you've had enough? This is where he feels a little whiny. You ever had a friend like just whining about their life when their life is better than your life? Oh, I don't know why I have to go through this. Yeah, me either. I mean, when you're single, isn't it so irritating to hear like your girlfriend going, oh, he's just not paying attention to me anymore and he's not loving. Like, at least you have a man, right? You know, you complain about your job to the person who just wants any job. And he says, I've had enough. I'm going, Elijah, you've had a better life than everyone I know. But you see, when you're struggling in that darkness, you don't remember all that God has done. You just remember everything you've been through. And you need to be careful, because the way you remember your past is the way you will create your future. He says, and then it says that he laid down under the bush and fell asleep. What do you do when you're depressed? Sleep, eat, not eat. Some of you, when you're depressed, you can't eat. Some of you, when you're depressed, you just can't stop eating. Some of you, when you're depressed, you sleep. Some of you, when you're depressed, you sleep, you eat, and you can't eat all at the same time. But here he goes to sleep. In fact, about a month ago, right when the book was coming out, I was feeling really stressed out, and I said to my wife, Kim, hey, let's go get pizza. She was kind of surprised, because I tried to be healthy, and she goes, okay. So we went and got pizza. I ate like this giant pizza, and I shared a little bit. And then after we finished the pizza, I said, let's go get ice cream. So we went next door. She goes, okay. And that's been like 10 years since I've done that, maybe never. And went and got ice cream. And then I'm thinking, pink boxes. We should go get some donuts. Right? You ever notice that sometimes when you're depressed, you're just trying to feed it? Or when you're stressed, you're trying to feed it, but you can't feed it because you have to starve it. But but maybe not. It says an angel touched him, which, by the way, is a beautiful thing because God caresses him when he's depressed. He caresses him when he's afraid. He caresses him when he's running. He caresses him when he's paralyzed. He doesn't slap him around and say, "Get up, you lazy, worthless, ungrateful." He just caresses him and he goes, "Get up and eat." I love the fact that the first thing God does is he helps restore his health. He helps restore his strength. And this is beautiful. I don't know if you've ever seen this before. And there by his head was some baked bread over hot coals and a jar of water. Now go with me. Hot coals with baked bread. God's chefing. Baked bread, a little marinara, a little mozzarella, mushrooms and pepperoni. You got pizza. This is God making pizza. And then it happens a second time. Baked bread, little hole in the middle, little cinnamon or chocolate. You twist it up if you want to make it fancy. Donuts. Don't let anyone tell you that God does not use carbs to bring you back to health. Okay. Don't judge me when I'm letting God heal me. And a jar of water, I'm sure it was sparkling. A little twist of lime. And he ate and he drank and he laid down again because he didn't have the strength to live. There's some of you, you can't go to sleep at night and you can hardly wake up in the morning and you barely have the strength to get up and just live. You're just existing, you're just surviving, you're just making it through the day. And then the angel came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." And here's the beautiful thing about God. He says, I know where you're at. I know the journey is too much for you. But by the way, God will never call you on a journey that's too little for you. He's going to call you always to a journey that's too much for you, because in that, he's going to be the much for you. But I love how he's already telling his story. He goes, the journey is too much. Elijah's not thinking about a future journey. He's thinking about ending his story. And God is saying, you think this is the end of your story. This is the beginning of your new story. We're just getting going. And some of you need to realize that because you are in the hands of the creator of the universe who's writing your story, there's always another page. You should never give up on the story of you, because God is writing it. And I am so sick and tired of losing people I love to suicide. I'm so done losing people I love because they did not believe that tomorrow could be better than today, that they could be better than they are, that the world could be better than it is. And God says, I have for you a future and a hope. And I want you to know there will never be a moment in your life, no matter what you see, no matter what you think, no matter what you feel, no matter what you're in, there'll never be a moment in your life that there is not a future and a hope waiting for you. But you have to be willing to fight for it. It doesn't come to the passive. It comes to the person who decides that life is worth fighting for. And then he got up and he ate and drank. And then it says, strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached the mountain of God. I want you to notice something. When he was running from God, he only had the strength for one day. But now that he's walking with God, he has the strength for 40 days. And he walks to the mountain of God. The moment you find your intention, the moment you return back to the purpose for which God created you, you will find the strength you thought was lacking. It was there all the time. He says, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. See, this is what God will not do. God will not sit there while you sulk. He will not stay in your despair. He will not stay with you in your anxiety because he doesn't want you to stay there. It says the Lord is about to pass by. He is moving and calling Elijah into his future. And I love the question God asked him. It's such a telling question. He says, Elijah, what are you doing here? Now that's a rhetorical question, by the way, that God did not intend for Elijah to answer. He knows why Elijah's there, and he knows how he got there. But he's actually asking him, Elijah, why have you given up on your life? Why have you given up on me? Why have you walked away from your future and drifted backwards? Elijah, what are you doing here? And he says, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. That's what I'm doing here. Do you have any questions, God? And the Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord. I'm going to pass by. And then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And Elijah knew the fire of God, but he had forgotten the God who sent the fire. See, and I think a lot of us, we keep thinking inner peace is going to come by God doing something spectacular, by God performing a miracle, that peace is going to come in just an instant. But I want you to know that Jesus, who is the Prince of Peace, Jesus who came to bring your peace, is not going to bring it in an instant, because peace isn't a place. It's a person who takes you on a journey. And that peace will come in the middle of the chaos. That peace will come in the middle of the battle. And as long as you're here on this earth, as long as you're taking a breath, you're called to be in this battle and to fight for peace. Code 1 of the way of the warrior is the warrior fights only for peace. And the peace begins in us. And after the fire, there came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? I remember when Robin Williams ended his life. I remember the deep sense of sorrow I felt. Maybe it's because I loved him as an artist, or because I had a brief encounter with him one time outside of a men's room. And while we're standing in the hallway, he began just talking and began a monologue of such genius and brilliance that we were all laughing hysterically. How a person could bring such joy, could see the world with such beauty and wonder and be so tormented and broken and empty. And it was Robin who said this: I used to think that the worst thing in life was to end up alone, to end up all alone. It's not. The worst thing in life is to end up with people who make you feel all alone. I want you to know that you're not alone. And if you feel alone, it may be because you're with the wrong people and you've run from the wrong one. See, a lot of times when we're in pain, a lot of times when we're hurting, a lot of times when we're at war, we run from God when we need to be running to him. And that's why it's not the earthquake, it's not the wind, it's not the fire, it's just his voice calling you intimately, tenderly to him. We were on vacation, my wife Kim and Aaron and Mariah, our son and daughter, and her husband Jake, and his parents were there, and his brother and his wife, and we had like this family day, and we were at this cafe, but our kids didn't want to sit with us, so they sat at another table, and then we sat at this other table, and then there's all these people talking in between, and we were talking and they were talking, but we couldn't hear them and they couldn't hear us. And suddenly Jake's mom, Susan, wanted to get Mariah's attention, and she goes, Mariah, 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 Mariah. And Mariah just kept on talking and engaging over there. She couldn't hear a thing. And Susan was, Mariah. And then I just had to stop. And I just went, Mariah. And she turned around and looked right at me. She said, what? And Susan Goss looked at me and said, I can't believe that just happened. I wouldn't have believed it if I had not seen it. I'm going to remember that the rest of my life. And I'm pretty sure I just went, Mariah. It was just a whisper. But I knew she would hear me in the middle of the crowd. Because even though she loves Susan, she knows me. And she knows my voice. And there's some of you here right now. You know what you need? You don't need the spectacular from God. You don't even need, quote, the miraculous from God. You don't need God to show off. You know what you need? You need God to whisper into your soul, I love you. I've got you. We're going to take on this battle together. Because the battle for peace, the peace of your soul, you're the only one who can go there. I can't help you. No therapist can help you, because the battle in your soul, you're the only one who can get there. Oh, except for one other. And his name is Jesus. And if you invite him into your life, if you give him access to you, if you open up your life to him, if you give him your life and let him give you his life, he will fight that battle for peace, and he will never leave you, and he will take you on the path to inner peace. And he is the warrior who will fight for you.